Welcome to the first episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. I've decided to split the first episode into two parts, so here is part one. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source of information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility related. In today's episode, I'll be talking about what fertility awareness is and why you'd want to learn about it. And then I'll talk about some of the awesome benefits of charting your cycles with fertility awareness, whether you're planning to use it as birth control or whether you're trying to conceive or whether you're just doing it for information's sake so you can learn a little bit more about your body. Either way, you'll find out why it's awesome. And if you find that any of the topics I'm talking about today resonate with you, or if you just want to connect with me and say hello, you can tweet me at FertilFriday. And if you have any questions or comments about today's podcast, please stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes about today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/intro. So a little bit about how I started teaching women to use the fertility awareness method. I started charting my own cycles about 13 years ago. And I had been on the pill prior to that. My doctor had put me on the pill when I was about 15 years old or so. And I was put on the pill because I struggled with heavy and painful periods for years. And so I was put on the pill as a way to mask those symptoms. And so I never actually chose the pill. And I got to a certain age where I decided I wanted to try to tackle my menstrual issues head on. I wanted to try to find a way to heal myself, and I did believe it was possible, even though I didn't know how at the time. And I just wasn't comfortable taking medication every day when I wasn't sick. It just didn't sit right with me. And I didn't feel comfortable taking synthetic hormones either, especially because it seemed like it was for an indefinite period of time. There was no end in sight. So I went off the pill, tried to start working towards healing my cycles and balancing my hormones. And along the way, I found the fertility awareness method just at the right time. And when I first discovered the fertility awareness method, I bought myself a copy of Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler, and I read as much as I could about fertility awareness and charting, and I started teaching myself how to chart. And I was really fortunate to be living in a community where there was actually a group of women who started a fertility awareness charting circle. And so I was able to attend and meet other like-minded women who were also charting their cycles and learn to chart with other women who had experience with charting. And in addition to that, I was able to get all of my questions answered, especially when I was first starting, which is when it's all brand new. And, you definitely have questions about what cervical mucus is supposed to look like. Are my cycles normal? Why did my temperature seem to be a little off that day? And so it really helped me to solidify my knowledge and my confidence in learning the method, because it's one thing to read it in a book, but it's a total other thing to get your head around it and to truly become confident and to trust the method. And so my involvement with the group, I quickly became a volunteer because when I learned about this method, I just became so passionate about it. It's something that I feel every woman should have the opportunity to learn, regardless of whether or not you want to use it as birth control or however you want to use it. It's the knowledge that every woman should have, because at least then you have the option and you have the knowledge and you can make informed choices. So I quickly became a volunteer and I started to teach women to chart their cycles. And I was so fortunate to be able to actually train as a Justice Body Literacy advocate. And the group of us trained and we became Justice Body Literacy advocates. And what that meant was that we received formal training in the basic biology behind it, as well as how to teach the Justice method of cycle charting. And it increased our confidence and our ability to share this knowledge with women and also to help them interpret their charts and to be able to identify if and when to refer especially because what happens is when you start charting your cycles, if there's any health issues that you have or any hormonal imbalances that you might have, you'll see them on your charts. If you're not ovulating, you'll see it on your chart. Or if you have abnormally low temperatures, that might indicate a thyroid issue. Or so there's a lot of different things that can show up on your charts. And one of the great things about the training that we've received is that we're able to kind of identify if there's something wrong. So that was just a really great experience for me, kind of being in the exact right place at the right time. And over the years, I just truly believe that there's something very special and powerful about learning to interpret your fertility signs. With the fertility awareness method, the 3 main signs that you observe when you're using the method are your cervical mucus, your cervical position, so that the position of your cervix actually changes throughout your cycle, as well as basal body temperature. And what the fertility awareness method teaches you is it teaches you to gain the confidence to be able to tell on any given day whether you're fertile or not. So when you gain that confidence to be able to determine, am I fertile today? Could I get pregnant if I had unprotected sex today? Or am I not fertile today? It actually can have a profound impact on so many areas of your life. And I know for me, it's definitely had a profound impact on my life. And it's just something that I just firmly believe. I'm so passionate about it. And I firmly believe every woman should have the opportunity to learn. And so essentially, fertility awareness is a natural hormone-free birth control method. So it works and it's extremely effective. Studies have shown that it's up to 99.6% effective. And as someone who's been using this method of birth control for 13 years, as I mentioned, I've never had an issue with it. I found it to be extremely effective, and I found it to be so much more than just a birth control method, because it's really given me the ability to learn so much about my body and my health. And it's really kind of a window into your overall health. And so the reason that it works and the whole basis of it, it's based in science. So the reason that it works is because there's only a specific window of time in every cycle that you can actually get pregnant. And so that window is about a week or so, give or take, depending on how long your mucus cycle is, how many days of cervical mucus that you have. But essentially, there's only a certain window when you can get pregnant, and the rest of the time, it's physically impossible to get pregnant. So it's kind of like you're either fertile or you're not. And when you're not fertile, you actually cannot physically get pregnant. Like, it's impossible. And so that is something that, especially when you're learning the method, like, it's one thing to read it in the book, and it's one thing to hear someone like me say that, but it's a total other thing for you to actually get your head around the fact that there's periods of time in your cycle that you can have unprotected sex and not get pregnant. But it's science, and it's actually it's true, and it actually works. And so your body is actually amazing. And for the majority of your cycle, your body actively kills sperm, like pretty much on contact. So your body is like a sperm killing machine pretty much all the time, except for that fertile window. So basically, in order for a woman to get pregnant, general, so I'll take you back to biology class a little bit here, but in order for a woman to get pregnant, essentially, as we probably all know, sperm have to enter into the vagina, and then they have to swim through the cervix and make their way into the uterus, where they then swim into the fallopian tubes. So if you've seen the uterus, or if you could picture the uterus, and then outside the uterus are the fallopian tubes, and they're kind of like hands that stretch out with little fingers that stretch out towards the ovaries. So the sperm have to swim into the vagina, through the cervix, they have to swim in the uterus, and then they have to swim through the fallopian tubes. And then once the egg is released from the ovaries into the tubes, fertilization happens in the tube. And so in order for the egg to be fertilized, once it's released, the sperm already have to be there. So the sperm, once the egg is released and rolling down the fallopian tube, that's where the conception takes place. But as I mentioned already, this is really only possible during a small window of time. And the rest of the time, it's actually impossible because your body's actively killing sperm. So let me tell you how the sperm killing aspect of things work. So during the majority of your cycle, you're infertile. So what that means is that your vagina is normally acidic, and sperm can't survive in an acidic environment. So that's one strike against them, because your vagina is normally acidic, sperm can't survive in there. Your cervix is actually closed for the majority of your cycle, and it's something you can feel. So the fertility awareness method does involve getting a little bit more intimate with your body. In order to feel your cervix, you would have to, wash your hands and insert your finger into your vagina and touch your cervix. And when your cervix is in a closed position, it's in a closed or low position, and the feel of it would feel kind of firm like the end of your nose. But for the majority of your cycle, your cervix is closed. And essentially, if the cervix is closed, like the sperm can't even get in. So they can't even get into the entrance. But in addition to the cervix being closed, the opening of the cervix, there's actually a mucus plug in there. So this is not mucus that you observe, because the mucus is plugging the opening of the cervix. And essentially you could picture the mucus kind of like a mesh with lots and lots of tangled threads, just like a net. And the sperm can't actually swim through it. They get stuck, they get tangled. So it's a physical barrier that essentially just will not let them in. And in addition to that, the actual mucus plug has an acidic pH as well. So the sperm have all of these strikes against them. And also, during the infertile periods of your cycle, you are not ovulating. So in addition to all of those other methods that your body is killing sperm and actively preventing you from being able to get pregnant, there's no egg anyways. So the sperm couldn't make it through the cervix if they wanted to, but there's no egg anyways. And I mean, what I love about the fertility awareness method is that it's science, because I'm kind of a bit of a science geek. And so that's what really drew me to it in the beginning when I first started learning it, because it's based in science, like it's biology, and it's actually physically impossible for the sperm, unless you're in your fertile window, there's absolutely no way that you could get pregnant. And of course, I was definitely taught in my sex ed class that there was no safe day, that you could get pregnant every single day. And so it was this fear mongering that taught me to be afraid that any possible day, you're always worried that you if you ever have unprotected sex, that we will get pregnant, because that's what you're taught. But it's just completely false, because it's cyclical. Your body's really smart, and there's all of these amazing things going on in the background that you just, unless someone teaches you about it, you don't really learn about it. You don't really know about it. And you can think of it like this. I love analogies and metaphors, so bear with me here, but you could picture your uterus like a big, beautiful house. And your cervix, which is actually at the base of the uterus, is like the door of the house. And so during your infertile period, the door is locked, and there's a giant electrified fence outside, like around the door, to prevent you from getting in. And in addition to that, the pathway leading up to the door is on fire. So that's essentially what it's like. The pathway to the door is on fire. There's an electrified fence, and the door is locked. So there's no getting in. And to break it down, on most of the days of your cycle, your vagina is a sperm killing machine. Sperm can't survive in the vagina for very long because the pH is too acidic. And sperm can't even get through the door, even if they wanted to. So they're just being killed off left, right, and center. So let's talk about the fertile window now, so that you can get a sense of how pregnancy is even possible in such a hostile environment. The key to understanding when you're fertile and when you're not is cervical mucus. So cervical mucus, it keeps sperm alive long enough for it to fertilize the egg. Cervical mucus has more of an alkaline pH that the sperm can actually survive in. So what happens on your mucus days, as your estrogen levels rise in the body during the first half of your cycle, day one of your cycle is the first day of your period, and during the first half of your cycle, so the period of time before you ovulate, that phase is characterized by estrogen. And as the estrogen levels rise, that is what stimulates the changes that put you into your fertile window. So your estrogen levels rise, your cervix softens, and the estrogen stimulates your cervix to start producing cervical mucus. And as soon as you start to observe cervical mucus, that's an indication that you're in your fertile window. And that's an indication that as the estrogen levels rise, once they rise to a certain level, that's what triggers ovulation to happen. And all of these things are happening. The cervical mucus starts flowing, and the cervix starts to soften, and it starts to change position. The cervix actually begins to open. And once the cervical mucus starts flowing, it actually changes the pH of your vagina, and it creates this hospitable environment for your sperm. And it's the cervical mucus that keeps the sperm alive, and it creates an environment where they're able to survive and thrive long enough for them to make their way into the cervix through the uterus and hang out in the fallopian tubes waiting for the egg to drop. And so going back to my lovely house analogy, during your fertile window, you could picture the same house, but this time the electrified fence is gone. The double doors to the big, beautiful house are wide open, and there's no fence, there's no barbed wire pathway to the door is no longer on fire. Now it's a beautifully landscaped pathway, and there's beautiful trees and shrubs, and it just looks amazing now. And alongside the path is a giant buffet, all you can eat buffet filled with all of your favorite foods. And as you go into the doors, the buffet tables just keep on rolling by, and there's an usher, and the usher brings you in, escorts you in, brings you upstairs, and eventually escorts you all the way up until you get to the the ballroom where you're waiting for the egg to drop. So in that analogy, it's a completely different environment. During your fertile window, everything is sperm friendly. Everything's coming up in the sperm's favor, because your body is trying to make sure that they can survive long enough to fertilize the egg. But when there's no egg to fertilize, and when you're not in the fertile window, there's no reason for the sperm to be there. And so it's like they're not welcome there at all. And to summarize then, cervical mucus changes the pH of the vagina. It creates this environment where the sperm can survive. And so essentially, without cervical mucus present, sperm can't survive. And it's not possible to get pregnant without cervical mucus. And ovulation only happens once every cycle, and it happens within a 12 to 24 hour period. And during that period of time, that very small window, if that's all that we had to be able to conceive, it would be very hard. Because could you imagine trying to have sex within a 12-hour period and that be the only period of time that you could actually have a baby? So cervical mucus extends the fertile window because it keeps sperm alive for about 3 to 5 days. And the basis for the fertility awareness method is being able to determine whether or not you're in that fertile window. And essentially what it boils down to is you're checking for cervical mucus every day. And it sounds like a lot, especially when you're hearing it at first. It sounds like it's really complicated and complex. And it's a skill. When you're learning fertility awareness, you could kind of consider it like as if you were learning to ride a bike or any other skill. You can read about it in a book, but if you're reading about, say, learning to ride a bike or something like that, it'll only take you so far reading it in a book. It's something that you need to practice. It's something that you need to get used to. You got to get used to what cervical mucus looks like, what it feels like, what the changes in your cervix feel like, and how to interpret the changes in your temperature. And it is something that takes a little bit of time to learn. But once you've acquired the skill, and once you get into the habit of checking for mucus throughout the day, every day, checking your cervical position, taking your temperature, once you get in the habit of those things, it's not that it's difficult, it's just forming the habit. And that's the basis, so that at least you have an idea of how the fertility awareness method works and why it works and why it's effective. But once you've had a few months to practice and to learn how the cycles work, what cervical mucus looks like, and once you become confident in being able to tell whether or not you've observed any mucus that day, whether or not you're fertile or not that day, that's when the method is truly effective, when you are confident in your ability to identify whether or not you're fertile. And then you're the one that gets to decide what you're going to do about that knowledge. So you determine that you're fertile today. Well, what does that mean for you? Does that mean that you're going to avoid intercourse or avoid having genital contact? Does it mean that you're going to have alternative sex that doesn't involve genital contact, just so that you know you're not going to get pregnant? Does it mean that you're going to use condoms, or that you're going to use a diaphragm? Or if you're trying to have a baby, when you do observe your cervical mucus, you can identify your fertile window and then use that information to try, so you know exactly when to have sex so that you can try for a baby. What this information does is it just empowers your choices, and it really puts the power in your hands to be able to choose what you're going to do. And after so many years of using the method and knowing this, having this knowledge at my fingertips, I actually can't imagine my life without it, because on any given day, I know exactly what's happening in my body. And that leads me perfectly into some of the reasons why fertility awareness is so awesome. And as I've alluded to before or already, it's an awesome life skill to have. And as I said, it does take a little bit of time and effort on the front end to get used to it and to get the hang of it and to get used to what everything looks like and the different rules. But once you take the time to learn all of it, it's a skill that you always have. And that's one of the reasons why it's so awesome. It's free. I mean, practically free. It doesn't require a lot of startup costs. You might want to invest in a book. I would suggest that invest in a book so that at least you have a detailed guide for how to start charting with the fertility awareness method. You would probably need to invest in a thermometer. And then I use the Kandara charting app, and I still have some of my old charts, but I use the app now, but the app was free. And that's one of the reasons why it's so awesome, because you're self-reliant. You're teaching yourself a skill, and then you can always have it. And you don't have to go to the doctor and get a prescription or pay any money. You can just learn the skill, and then you always have it. Another reason why the fertility awareness method is so awesome is because it demystifies your body, and it really gives you the opportunity to learn what's happening. To give you an example of where it dawned on me, the other day I was talking to one of my girlfriends, and her and I actually had our sons around the same time. And she was telling me that she's expecting her second child. And she kind of alluded to the fact that it was a surprise. She had hoped that it would have happened a bit later. And when I was talking to her and when we were chatting about it, it really dawned on me that the whole concept of an oops is kind of out of my vocabulary now. With the knowledge that I have and the ability to identify my fertile signs, I would know whether I'm on a fertile day or not. I know what part of my cycle I'm in. And when I think about that, I want to kind of put it out there to you. So imagine for a moment what it would feel like never to have to worry about accidents, because you always knew what was happening in your body on any given day. And with that knowledge, if you know you're fertile, that can inform you and help you to be more vigilant with whatever birth control method that you're choosing. Or if you're choosing to abstain from sex, you can do that. Whatever you're doing, it really can inform your choices. So you know, okay, I'm fertile today. You can communicate that to your partner, and you can be extra careful with whatever fertile method. So I just wanted to put that out there, because I feel that it can't be understated how learning these body signs really demystifies what's going on, and it really puts you in the driver's seat. So I really feel now, with the years behind me and the experience behind me, I feel very confident. I'm in the driver's seat. I know exactly what's happening. I just had to put that out there, because I think I can confidently say that most women I know haven't had that experience where they just have that confidence because of the knowledge that comes with learning about your body. So that ties right into the next reason why fertility awareness is so awesome, because it's empowering. I mean, I've already kind of touched on that, so I don't need to go too much into it, but it does leave you with a feeling of empowerment just to fully understand. And so if you have this knowledge, then you can make it, it just changes your ability to make choices. And I also touched on one of the other reasons why fertility awareness is so awesome. And it's because it's effective. And as I mentioned the statistic of 99.6%. Now, often when you look up fertility awareness methods or the fertility awareness method online, you often don't see a 99.6% effectiveness rate. And I think that that's because they often lump it in with the rhythm method or with other methods that are absolutely not the same thing as the fertility awareness method. And the fertility awareness method, it's not based on guessing or counting days. It's not like, okay, well, my cycle was this many days last month, so this is how many days it's going to be like this month. So as I've talked about, it's about observing what your body's doing every day. So it's, what am I observing today? What am I seeing today? So if you're checking for cervical mucus, do I have cervical mucus today or not? And that helps you to determine whether or not you're fertile. If you have cervical mucus that day, you're fertile. If you don't have cervical mucus that day, then you're not fertile, depending on, there's, like I said, there's more to it. There's some rules around it, but that's the basics. And when you're confident in your ability to be able to identify your fertile days, well, if you're only having unprotected sex on the days that it's physically impossible for you to get pregnant, then you can't get pregnant. It's biology, it's scientific. And so that's why it's so effective. So the 99.6% effectiveness rate is based on couples who were not having sexual contact during that period of time. That doesn't mean that that's what you have to do, because when you have this knowledge, it just informs you. So you are the one that is going to decide what you're going to do with that information. So you get the knowledge and the information, and then you make your choices. But that's where that effectiveness rate comes. So to put it into perspective, if you use condoms during your fertile time, then the effectiveness is going to be the effectiveness of the condom that you're using. So it's just something to keep in mind. And one of the other awesome benefits of the fertility awareness method is that it's effective and it's a hormone-free type of birth control. You know, it's environmentally friendly. You don't need to put any hormones into your body. I mean, there's no one birth control method for everybody. And so obviously the fertility awareness method isn't going to be for everybody. Everyone isn't going to want to jump their pills and start touching their cervix every day. But with that being said, if hormones aren't really working with you, if you find that they have a negative impact on your mood or on your libido, because one of the unfortunate side effects of the pill is that it can lower your libido. I had a girlfriend tell me once, well, what the heck is the point of me being on the pill if I don't want to have sex with my boyfriend anymore? And one of the great things about the fertility awareness method is it doesn't involve any synthetic hormones. It's totally natural. And so it can actually improve your sex life, because the way Mother Nature designs it is that during your fertile window, she wants you to make a baby. Mother Nature's whole job is to make us make babies. So it just so happens that during your fertile window, you're dripping with fertility. Your cervix is releasing and producing cervical mucus. And the cervical mucus, sometimes it looks lotiony, kind of like hand lotion, and it can also look like egg white. So it's like this stretchy, slippery, lubricative egg white fluid that's coming from your cervix. And sometimes women can have such a high water content in their cervical mucus that it can actually be like water, just really, really wet. And it just so happens that during that fertile window, you're often kind of horny because Mother Nature's trying to make you have a baby. So what you might find is that once you kind of go off the hormones and, you know, use fertility awareness or whatever other type of birth control that's non-hormonal, you might find that your sex drive goes up and your libido goes up because you're kind of taking advantage of your natural hormone cycle. And one of the other reasons that fertility awareness is so awesome is that when you are ready to try to conceive, or if you're wanting to try to conceive, it can help you to optimize your chances of conception. So when you're using the fertility awareness method for birth control, all of your mucus days are fertile. So that's important to know. Regardless of whether it's lotioning mucus or whether it's stretchy mucus, all of the mucus is fertile. But when you're using the fertility awareness method to try to conceive a baby, it takes it another step, because although all mucus is fertile, in order to optimize your chances of getting pregnant, if you do observe any peak type mucus, so any stretchy mucus or egg white mucus, that mucus is optimal for conception. So say if you're using the fertility awareness method for birth control for many years, if you decide at some point that you're ready to have a child, you don't have to you already have all the knowledge that you need to be able to optimize your chances of conception. Because if you've been charting your cycle already for the purpose of birth control, then you can identify your fertile window. So unlike the pill, the pill kind of puts you on autopilot. So you take it and you can kind of forget about what's going on in your body, and when you go off the pill, if you're trying to have a baby, then you still have to learn this information from scratch. But if you're using it to begin with, you already know. So that's another reason why it's so awesome. And the fertility awareness method, using it can help to foster communication with your partner, because in order for it to work, you and your partner kind of have to be on the same page, or you have to be able to talk to your partner. Okay, well, I today's a mucus day. I'm fertile today, so depending on your intentions at the time, then you can decide what to do about it. But it does involve communication around sex and around fertility, and so it's definitely kind of an unexpected side benefit of the fertility awareness method. And as I touched on already, one of the reasons why the fertility awareness is super awesome and fantastic is because, in addition to being able to use it for birth control or being able to use it to try to have a baby, it can also help you identify if you're having a health concern. So let me give you an example of that. So let's say that you're charting your cycles and you notice that you're not ovulating. That's a fairly significant roadblock, especially if you're trying to conceive. But if you're charting your cycles, it gives you information that you can take to a health practitioner. And also it gives you a frame of reference. So if you, for example, let's say that you're not ovulating, and then you start working with a functional health practitioner or a naturopathic doctor or a holistic reproductive health practitioner, and you start to implement certain changes to your diet, and you start taking certain supplements, and you actually, if you're charting your cycles, you can have a frame of reference. So maybe you're doing this protocol for a few months, and then you start to see that, oh, well, my cervical mucus is changing. The quality of the mucus is changing. I ovulated for the first time this month. Or you can have a frame of reference for how long that it took for the changes to take place. You can actually see the changes as they happen. And so that's one of the benefits of charting, and one of the reasons why it's really awesome, because these different changes that happen throughout your cycle and throughout the years of charting, you can really get a sense of how diet, lifestyle, sleep, alcohol, anything, exercise, how these things affect your overall health and your overall fertility. And so it truly is a window into your health. So I hope that gives you a good intro into what the fertility awareness method is all about. And this is obviously why I decided to split this introductory podcast into 2 episodes, because it was a little too long for just one. So please join me for part 2 of the introductory episode to the Fertility Friday podcast, where I'll be talking about some of the most common myths about fertility awareness and women's fertility in general. So thank you so much for listening. If anything that I talked about today, if you have any questions, or if you just want to stop by and say hello, again, you can tweet me at Fertile Friday, and you can stop by the blog and leave a comment in the show notes for this episode at fertilityfriday.com/intro. And you can also find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/fertilityfridays with an S. So until next time, be well and happy charting.